time to do a bit of weathering, I think. Now, I appreciate I'm working on a locomotive and this is all very scary, but what I'm going to try and do is use a method that I've found works really well and is fairly painless. That said, I wouldn't start on my best locomotive, I'd start on a wagon, but they will work all just as well. I'm working on an N-Gauge Class 50, and the scale of the model, I find, affects the weathering. Years ago, when I was working in 3mm scale, I started weathering the wagons exactly the same as I did in 4mm. And you know what? They looked odd. Eventually, I worked out that there was actually almost too much detail in the weathering. I was putting too much effort in, and I found a little simple wash of dirt over the wagons in the slightly smaller scale looked absolutely spot on. And when I moved up to O gauge, I found that I actually had to do a lot more work on the wagons because the greater level of detail, you're effectively close to the wagon. So with N-Gauge, I think there are one or two very simple techniques you can do. Now the first thing is that I like to dry brush all the bogie sides, and I don't use a lot of colours. I simply use dark grey over any black areas, and then a little bit of track colour, because I have a theory that everything on the railway basically becomes dirty brown. Dry brushing is simple enough. Take a reasonably old brush. This is an old Humbrol Coloro, which actually seems to work very well. Big fat thing. Get the worst of the paint off, and then just brush it backwards and forwards, up and down over all the black areas. People do say to me, why do you do dry brushing? Surely there's no need for it. And the reason is because physics and light don't work quite as well in the smaller scales as they do in real life. What I'm doing with the dark grey is I'm just highlighting the raised areas on the bogies, areas that would normally look slightly brighter than the shadow areas behind them, but by doing the dry brushing I'm emphasising the shadows, something you need to do simply because the shadows don't get emphasised enough in the scale model. So there we are. That was all that I'm going to do on the dark grey. Pick up a little bit of dirty brown. Not bothering cleaning the brush between them, and just a little bit there. What you should do, tiny amounts of paint. It should just drag the paint off the bristles on all the raised areas, leaving all the deeper areas like between the springs. They should all be paint free. And there we have it. A little bit of dirt on there, just enough to take the newness away from the bogies. Now you can dry brush the entire loco, but I'm not going to worry about doing that this time. I'm going to use Humbrol's paint wash. And the trick with that, basically this is, you could use a sort of thinned enamel. It will work, a thinned acrylic will work. This paint wash they do actually works very, very nicely, and I've used it a couple of times. I'm going to need, for this, dark brown paint wash. As you can see, everything goes dark brown. Everything gets filthy dirty, and it's all the same colour, basically, if you leave it off. I'm using a fairly wide brush, and most importantly, I have a second piece of kitchen towel. You can see I'm working over a bit of kitchen towel just to keep the studio table nice and clean, because otherwise they'll shout at me. But I've got a second bit because that is important to the technique. First job, just drag the paint down the locomotive, working downwards. Always work downwards because dirt works downwards because of rain. I don't know if you've noticed our liquid sunshine that we have around here, but that's it. There we are. That's ruined my locomotive now, you might say. And then here's the important bit. You take the kitchen towel and you drag it down there again, just wiping off the worst of the dirt, and hopefully it's going to stick in all the areas where dirt would collect on the real thing. You can see that the yellow ends have just picked up a bit of dirt. The more you rub, the cleaner it becomes again. This is a great effect that you can build up. So by just rubbing the towel down there, it's that simple with this stuff. It's just picked up a little bit of dirt. Class 50s didn't actually get that dirty. They got dirty because they're locomotives, they were out in the real world. But they didn't get that dirty. They didn't get certainly really horrible and decrepit for most of their working lives. So I don't really want to go mad. What you need to do is practice with this technique, because as you leave it it will dry and you'll actually get less dirt. It'll actually, the dirt will sort of vanish slightly as it sits there. I don't want the windows dirty, so just a damp, not wet brush with a bit of thinners on it. Just clean the windows. I know people like to model really filthy windows, but they didn't get that dirty. You know, the drivers did clean these things because they wanted to be able to see out of them. So just tickle the windows with a damp brush, and that will just lift them. It'll either lift the dirt out, or your paint wash out, or it'll just push it into the corners, which is exactly the same thing. And there we have it. That is a slightly dirty locomotive. Really quick and simple, fairly painless. The next stage, and the only finishing touch I will do, if I clear myself a little bit of space, I will actually do the dirt over the roof as well. But let's skip on a little bit and take some weathering powders, finishing touch, and just bit of muck around the exhaust ports. This is Humbrol smoke, and I am just brushing that in to the surface. Not going mad again. I don't want to overdo it with the dirt, because it's easier to add a bit more than it is to try and take the stuff away again. And there we are. There we are, a little bit of dirt, and you can already see that this out of the box model is really coming alive with all the dirt and the grime of a workaday locomotive, which is what I'm trying to represent. And there we are. That's only taken me a few minutes. I've used a very small number of tools, and certainly if you were to start with this on a wagon, you'd find the effects are really simple to replicate. And then, the world is your oyster. Trust me, once you get into making dirty locomotives and dirty wagons and that sort of thing, you won't want to stop. Everything's going to become filthy in your layout. But boy, is it going to be realistic.